The talk contains 4 parts mainly. In the first part, it's an introduction part. I will introduce to you, I aim to give you a general impression of the book. And I also share my research experience with you by applying ANT to study the production process of monkey. And in part 2, I will introduce to you actor network theory and its application to translation production research. And the next part is about the theoretical and methodological foundation of my book. And lastly, I'll introduce some findings. So in this part, in part 1, I like to share some of my experience of doing the research, of how I ended up choosing ANT and to study Waley's translation of 西游记 rather than other translated versions. This kind of research experience is kind of personal, not universally applicable, but I hope it would give you some idea of what it will be like to do research applying actor network theory. My book, Translation as Actor Network Theory, was written based on my PhD thesis at Durham, a literary translation as a translation project. The whole thesis is now available at Durham e-thesis repertoire, and you can download the thesis if you're interested to look at it. The book was published by Routledge in 2020 in the series Routledge Advances in Translation and Interpreting Studies. In this book, I mainly applies actor network theory to study the production of monkey. The full title of the translation is Monkey, a Folktale of China. It is one of the many translations of 西游记, aka Journey to the West. In this book, I examined the translation actors and how they interacted in the process of producing monkey. I will later explain what actor means in ANT, and for now, to give you a general impression, by translation actors, I refer to the people and things that worked or acted actively in the production process of the translation. And by actively, I mean they contributed either negatively or positively to the production process, non-neutral. Some ready examples of translation actor include the translator, the publisher, the editor of any translation. Some researchers, such as Ellen Buzelen, call them translation agents. But as actor in ANT has unique and different meaning from agents or even actors as termed in other sociological theories. So in my book, I still call them actors instead of agents, although agents may be more familiar or more constantly used in by far in translation studies. Monkey was translated by Arthur David Waley and published by George Allen and Unwin Limited, a publisher based on London, and the year of publication is 1942. Waley's translation was actually not a full translation of the original. It's more like an edited or abridged version of a translation. The original has altogether 100 chapters, whereas Waley chose to translate only 30 chapters out. The chosen content was, however, almost translated in full. The 30 chapters are almost translated in full. But with the verses deleted. It is interesting that before translating 西游记, Waley had already translated many Chinese poems, and he was highly appreciated for his poetry translation. The most represented translation was perhaps his 170 Chinese poems published in 1918, almost 2 decades ago. But when translating almost two decades earlier than when he started to translate Monkey. But when translating 西游记, he refused to translate the verses. The reason was directly expressed in his preface to Monkey, as we can see in this excerpt. If I make it full screen, I can't see this.
Oh.
Okay, then I'll change it too. Sorry. Sorry, just bear with me a few seconds. There's a little bit technical problem. Okay.
Sorry,
It's okay. Okay. Yeah. So, as we can see in his in this excerpt here, Waley, the reason was why Waley deleted all the verses was that he expressed it directly in this preface to Monkey. That was he thought that verses would go very badly into English. So I guess some of you may wonder why I chose to study Monkey, which is not even a full translation of the original, and why I decided to apply ANT. The answer to this question of why I chose ANT in first place was that during my master's, I read Constructing Sociology of Translation, edited by Michaela Wolf and Alexandra Fakari. I think many of you who are interested in the sociology of translation have already read that book. And by reading the book, I got a general impression, I got a general picture of what has been done in the research area in sociological paradigm of translation. And I knew that there were mainly 3 approaches, namely the systems approach, the social practice approach, and the last one is the network approaches. And by that time, I was aware that for the systems approaches, though there were not many articles, but there were at least 2 monographs on the systems approaches, which were Theo Herman's Translation in Systems and Sergei Chilenev's Applying Lingnan to Translation. And Herman's book covers a systematic introduction to the systemic approaches that could be applied to understand translation, while Sergei's is a very specialized probe into the Lingnan theory. And for the social practice approach, I guess there are so many discussions and articles in it. I guess you all know about that. So I thought it might be better for me to choose an approach that has not been explored by too many researchers who are more experienced and more smarter than me. So, and more importantly, after reading Elena Buzelin's article in that volume, Translation in the Making, I grew genuinely interested in ANT guided research. I mean, that piece of article opened a new perspective for me. I found myself attracted to that kind of research, which explores the production of translation in very practical and real translational circumstances. That was the first time that I know that translation could be studied as daily practices, not only as linguistic and cultural transfer, and not only as the practices of the translator, not even, but of many more other participants. When I first thought of studying the translation of 西游记, it was more like a coincidence. I browsed on the internet by accident about an interview with Julia Lavelle, who was then planning to retranslate 西游记 with Penguin Classics. So I thought that it would be a good opportunity for me to get first-hand material regarding the translation production, if I could be able to interview the translator and maybe the publisher. To me, back at that time, I considered that was a very good case study because the translation was in its budding stage, in its initial stage, and I was being able to follow the actors, follow the production process that happened afterwards. The research seemed visible to me. And moreover, of course, 西游记 is undoubtedly a literal canon, a very popular novel among Chinese people for generations of all ages. And that's no exaggeration. It's always a great thing for a researcher to get a great original, a great translator, a great publisher, and I did get in touch with Julia Lavelle, however, and she was indeed very helpful and very kind to accept my request, and we exchanged emails for a period of time. However, the information I could get from the translator was not enough for a study that concerns the production of translation. As you know, if you have read how the production process of the translation was divided or separated in my book into many different stages or phases. Translation, or more specifically, the verb or the action translating was only one very small stage of the whole production process of translation. So I need more materials from the publisher side. For example, how they edit and market the translation and so on. But unfortunately, that part of information was very difficult for me to get. That was the start for me to choose 西游记, and between this start and the end where I ended up with Monkey, there was still much work to do. I turned to look for other translations of 西游记, hoping to get enough data for my research. I turned to look for other translations, but to my surprise, I found at least 28 editions of English translations of 西游记, and they were not even excerpts included in books such as anthologies. They were books published separately and independently, and they were circulating in the markets, in book markets at that time. Of course, I did not want to check all these 28 editions. That would be too large a project for me. Not in the beginning, of course, at least when I still have so many editions to choose from. So my next step is to narrow down the list. I set up a group of criteria that could help me to narrow down the list. And the criteria for selection mainly are mainly divided aiming to consider the wholeness and the representativeness of the translation. And the list reduced from 28 to 5 translations, and actually 4, because at that time, the last one here, the number 28, the last one here was not likely to continue. It was the original project that I chose, Julia Lavelle's translation. You can, and it's interesting to look at that time. I did not know the title of the book, because Julia was still translating that 西游记, and she had not yet decided the title of the book. But you can see now the title of the book, Monkey King, Journey to the West. It was published 2021 in all possible forms of a book: paper, Kindle, and audiobooks. And when I exchange emails with Julia Lavelle, she said to me that the Penguin required her to, or asked her to incorporate the academic value and the entertaining effects of the original. So I think we can see, by looking at the title of this translation, Monkey King, Journey to the West, I think the purpose, the publisher, has been quite well fulfilled in the title, although I have not yet had the chance to read the translation yet. Another period, and after another period of web searching, library visiting, archive visiting, and exchanging emails with one of the translators, I finally spotted a mine of materials that fit perfectly for my research. That was the archival materials that regards the production of monkey. The materials were part of the historical collections preserved at the University of Reading, special collections. And this archival materials contain more than 200 letters exchanged between the translator and publisher and designer and other producers of the translation between 1940s and the 1960s. And besides letters, there are also contracts, notes, and all kinds of material that the participants used to communicate during the production process. These archival materials constitute the first group and the main source of information of my research. And so it occupies the archival materials, the main source of my research, occupies a center position in my research, because the entire book of description and discussion is made based on the period of the history of translating monkey that are recorded in those archival materials. And without them, both the whole book of description and analysis would be impossible. And the second group of materials that supports my research is contains all these materials. And you can see the first is the translation monkey and some other translations by the translator, including both main text and paratexts. And paratexts are especially important for ANC-guided research. The paratexts of this translation, they include the cover design, the translator's preface and introductions to his translation. And these prefaces and introductions in particular provide important information concerning the translator's opinion on translation, his choice of the original text, and his translation strategies and methods used. And second is the articles and books about the about and by the translator. These materials are either used together with the paratexts of translations to explore the translator's philosophy of translation, or to give more information about the translator. For example, the life experience of translator, his connections that he can use in the production of translations, and also the education of the translator, and so on. And the third are works by the publisher. There are mainly two works that I used. The first one is the TIIS about publishing, and the second one is the TIIS about the publisher. These two books provide information on the publisher himself, the operation of the publishing industry at that time, and the publishing company during that period, and some background information during the period when the production of translation was at its fastest rate of development during the Second World War. The fourth is the advertisements and book reviews of Monkey. These advertisements and book reviews may exist as archival materials, just like the letters, as I just mentioned. They are collected from the Gao primary sources. And this group of materials evidences much of the publicity.
So I'll just interrupt you once again. It seems like people are not seeing the slide moving.
Oh.
So if we can just stop the share and then share again.
Okay.
I think because we changed midway, maybe it just got stuck. Just stop the share and share again.
Okay.
Sorry.
Stop share and share screen. So I think it's
No, you're sharing a different screen. It seems.
Which one? Share. Screen 1, screen 2. I think it's screen 2, right?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. And the last, where did I stop? I think we stopped at, it's okay. We stopped at the last group of materials, supporting materials, the books and articles about, the fourth, right, advertisement and book reviews of Monkey. And this group of materials evidence much of the publicity campaign for Monkey, which was an important and integral part of the translation project. But however, this part was not recorded in the records in that archival material, records of George Allen and Unwin. So it is very important. The last group includes the books, including biography and articles about the designer, Duncan Grant. These materials were not collected all at once, of course. I believe most of you may have the same experience or may have experienced the same situation. that you have to collect data or find information, supplementary information along the process of your research. I found it particularly so in ANT-based translation studies. In early stage, I did not expect that the designer could have a big influence on the translation project. And when I realized that data, I need to go back and look for the materials regarding the designer again. And depending on the case on the study, there may be other sources that could provide information that concern the production and dissemination of the translation. And I think the basic principle is to collect as much data as possible using appropriate methods. This is how I ended up with doing ANT research on monkey rather than on any other translations, the many other translations of monkey, of Journey to the West. My PhD supervisor, Sergei Chulenev, he was one of my supervisors at that time. After hearing about the whole process, how I ended with monkey, he reminded me that this process is itself a good reflection of ANT philosophy. That is, nothing is for sure from the start. And there are so many choices that I need to make, and so many unexpected twists and turns that I need that might happen, that all can lead to a result that I did not expect from the start. And at the same time, a simple change of mind or action could lead my research to a completely different course. So this is the second reason why I want to share my research experience with you. Hoping that it makes some echo with what Latour constantly highlights in his book, Reassembling the Social, that society is uncertain, unpredictable, and unexpected. And maybe also the three principles of ANT, if you have read about that, in Calonne's vital work of the domestication of scallops, which reminds us to keep agnostic, to keep skeptical, and to keep open to all kinds of possibilities, which will change the course of action and the course of development of society. So much about the introduction of the book, and I can finally talk about ANT and its application to translation. ANT came into shape when a group of researchers conducted social studies in science and technology, in the field of science and technology, to see how scientific knowledge and technology were produced. The initial stage of the theory can be traced back to late 1970s and early 1980s. And the forefathers of ANT include here Michael Calonne, Bruno Latour, and John Law, among others. The way that ANT researchers look at society is similar to that of microsociologists. In microsociology, researchers put emphasis on individuals, on the interpersonal connection between different individuals, between people, whereas macrosociology studies society in a grander scale. If we see social structures of social institutions, social norms as at the top of society, and the individuals as at the bottom, microsociology is a bottom-up approach that studies how individuals could influence the social structure, social systems. And on the other hand, macrosociology is a top-down approach. It's more like a top-down approach that sees how the larger social context imposes on the individuals. As actor network theory is unique and different from other microsociologists, from other sociological approaches, and even from other network theories. And so I think it's necessary to introduce to you how it is unique and how it is different. We can get a better idea of ANT and its uniqueness by looking at the very name of the theory, actor network theory. So let's first look at actor. What is an actor? According to the definition of Latour, an actor is anything that does modify a state of affairs by making a difference. So here, what does it mean? It means that anything, people, or things that can change, can make change to any course of action or to any course of development can be seen as an actor. So it is interesting to see that not only in ANT, not only humans can act, but also non-humans can be seen as actors, and they also have agency on society. I think a good example to help us to understand non-human actor or non-human agency is Gudic and Ricon's research on artists in an ecological restoration program. So Otter, what is an otter? Otter is a lovely creature here in this picture. And in this case study, some environmentalists made a proposal to protect otters. Before the local authorities could prove the proposal and add otters in the protected animal list, they need to evaluate the necessity and evaluate the situation. However, they found that it is not, the otters misbehaves. They trespass boundaries, they intrude into people's houses, and they overproduce. And these misbehaviors of the otters resulted in the failure of the restoration program. Because the authorities redefine otters, they redefine otters as animals that did not need to be protected anymore. So I think this is an example that vividly shows that otters as non-human actors in this case misbehaved and led to the failure of the restoration program. And what is an actor network? Latour, in his 1987 monograph on Science in Action, he describes that the actor network can be, it's like a star-shaped configuration with some actors spread it around a central actor or center, or around a center where all resources or all actors can verge into that center and make a society or make anything or make a project happen. But in his later research, in his later monograph, Reassembly Social, he did not, he turned to emphasize the unpredictability and heterogeneous of actor network, and he never mentioned that star-shaped configuration. So I think as the theory develops, I think the theorists are more prone to understood actor network as they are prone not to confine the configuration of the actor network, and in order to keep it open to all possibilities and open to different configurations, and to add more possibilities of how what an actor network could be and how it could be configured. And the last one is theory. Latour in particular, he did not like the word theory in the title of actor network theory. He thinks that it is better for us to call it an ontology. For him, I think it is more like an ontology that helps us to study the becoming of society in reality. And he also, some sociologists, some ANT researchers also called it a methodology. And indeed, ANT comprises a system of methods that can guide us through our research. For example, it proposes that researchers should follow the actors and to trace the trials left by actors in their social doings. So, and because many of the forefathers of ANT, for example, Latour and Coulomb, were anthropologists. So when reading their work, you will find that methods that are common in anthropology are also commonly used in ANT research. For example, Coulomb's study of the domestication of scallops used participant observation and interview, and so does Latour's work. Latour's work on science in action. In that research, Latour observed the daily doings. He actually joined a lab and observed the daily doings of the scientists in the lab and interviewed them. ANT has been applied to many areas of research. Of course, sociological studies, and also education, management, health service research, and importantly for us, in translation studies. When applied to translation, ANT always leads to studies that focus on the translation production process. This type of research focuses on the process of producing, right? The manufacturing process of translation. And it is process-oriented, but not cognitively or psychologically oriented. And instead, it focuses on actions of the participants of translation, and it focuses on behaviors and actions of the participants. And by participants, here ANT refers not ANT-based research in translation does not only refer to translator alone, but instead it refers to all the agents involved in translation. For example, the initiator of translation, the proofreader, or the publisher, etc. And this is what translation production research is what Elena Bozellin called translation in the making, or the translation production network. And by the time I was doing my research, and the status, the research status, or the state of art of the field of research is that some key concepts of ANT had been already introduced. For example, Bozellin in his paper, I think it is a very early paper that deals with ANT guided research on translation. She introduced translation and network, and also increasing number of case studies had always been had also been conducted. And here I'm giving you an example to see what could be revealed by examining the production process of translation. It is Bojik's 2010 research on the translation of Simone de Beauvoir, the deuxième sexe. I like this research very much, and let's have a look at it. In Bojik's research, why Bojik chose to study the translation of deuxième sexe? Because she explained that because the translator of the deuxième sexe was harshly criticized by literary critics, and because the translation was very different from the source text, and there are many deletions made about the translation, and Bojik asked the question: so is it the translator to blame for the so-called bad translation? So she did her research based on letters exchanged between the translator and editor and president of the publishing house, and he analyzed the conflicts and negotiations that had gone through between these participants, and he finds that besides the translator, there are other agents who can decisively influence translation production. In this case, it is the publisher, the editor, or the president of the publishing house. It is their requirement for the translator to. They ask the translator to do a lot of deletions and omissions and editing of the original. Which finally led to a translation that was very different from the source text. And so in this third part, I will introduce to you the theoretical and methodological foundation of the book. The concepts and ideas used in my book. The previous studies on translation that adopt an ANT perspective based mainly on Bruno-Latour's actor network theory, either alone or with other or together with other theories. For example, Bojik's research, Haddadi and Morgadon's research, and Bow's research. And my research managed to make a combination of the core concepts of ANT from Michael Coulomb, Bruno-Latour, and John Law. And in my research, I firstly introduced the basic ideas of ANT to clarify the logic of the theory. And then I moved on to explain its key concepts. But a difficulty of understanding ANT is that the theory is in constant development theoretically. This means that different researchers may have given different interpretations of some of the concepts in various scales of application. And as time goes by, some early definitions may experience some changes. So I used some methods to incorporate the ideas and concepts of the theory. The methods I use include first choose or adopt the most suitable definition, and the example here is the concept of obligatory passage point. And I think we do not have time to go into that, and I will just move on to the next method, is to integrate the existing meanings of some concepts and to make the definitions more precise or comprehensive. For example, actor. I developed the concept of actor based on many examples given by A&T researchers, and also proposed criteria to separate actors from people, entities, or elements that took part in translation. This separation is crucial because otherwise the translation network, or otherwise there will be too many actors and too many actors that are involved in the production of monkey, which will make my research impossible. And the boundary of the translation network is blurred, and it would be impossible to distinguish translation network from other networks. I gave an example in my book, that is, if we consider everything that could change the state of affairs and as an actor, as Letuc termed it, then the postman delivering the letters exchanged between the publisher and the translator can also plays a role in translation process, because they are essential. If they do not deliver the letters, the communication between the translator and publisher would interrupt it, and so did the translation project. But if we include these actors, include the mail delivery or the postman, many other actors can also, actors kept jumping in into the network of translation. So what we need to do is to cut the network to include only the actors that are involved most directly in the translation production, and actors that are one step away from the network, such as the postman. They're directly connected with the letters, right? And the letters are directly connected with the production of translation. So postman is one further step away from the translation network. So this is how I managed to cut the translation network from the, for example, mail delivering network. And in reality, these networks exist, and they constantly entangle. So it's very important for us to find a way to draw a boundary between the network that we are focused on. And the last method is that I further proved or extended in my discussions analysis some ideas and concepts. For example, I do not only introduce for example, the modes of interesting actors. Letuc introduces 5 modes of interesting actors, while I find some modes of interestment are not did not happen in my research, but some other modes of interestment happened. So I think my research can make the modes that are identified in my research can make a supplement or complement to the 5 modes of interestment in Letuc's research. And these are the concepts that adapted and built into the theoretical framework of my research. I will skip this for now, and then we will go to the research method part. There are 2 groups of methods that I used. The first one is very practical methods that I used to in data collection, and the second group is the group of methods that are used to analyze data. And the first group consists of very practical methods, and they include online searches, interviews, archival research. And in brief, the principle, as I just mentioned, is to collect as much as much data as possible that is related to the production of monkey. And the second group of methods consists methodological rules designed to guide and regulate my research on aspects such as information screening and the description, discussion, and analysis of the data in use. And they are based on the three principles proposed by Cologne and rules and methods by Latour. And the main content is that the focus of the study lies on the translation production carried out by translation actors working in practical social circumstances, rather than, for example, on the translation of the text itself, or within the influence of a broad social or translational cultural system or context in the production of translation. And second is that no assumptions should be made concerning the items, such as the development of the translation project, the number and variety of translation actors, as well as their actions and ways of connecting, and even the outputs. This helps to identify the real conditions in which the translation stages phases through which the project develops, and the unexpected events that might change a project or a translation substantially. So the possibility of finding new things or new developments is open up. And third is that there's still a problem of defining the actors. I think I just mentioned it I've just mentioned it when I introduced to you how to cut the networks, how to draw a boundary between networks. It is a method or criteria for identifying actors. So the criteria is that if the entities directly acted upon or have direct influence on the process of translation, then they are considered as actors of translation. So the starting point of research is, as a result, translation action. This conforms to the claim of ANT researchers that society or ready-made artifacts or any fact is not the cause, but the effect of actions. And lastly is non-human actors and agencies should no longer be avoided or neglected. And translation researchers need to pay more attention to the heterogeneity of the actors and agencies that make a translation. I think non-human actors and agencies should be studied as translation actors. They should be studied as translation actors and discussed in the same terms and in an equal way to human actors, just like ANT theorists who emphasize the heterogeneity of elements that make the society, and translation researchers need also to pay more attention to the heterogeneity of translation actors. And also, and lastly, I think I'll introduce to you some findings of my research. And first one is ANT is perfectly applicable to studying the production of translation, chosen for current research projects. It helps to build a theoretical and methodological framework that enables an in-depth exploration of the production process monkey. And the second is a wide range of human translation actors were identified, some of which have already been identified in previous studies of the same kind, such as the translator, the publisher, and proofreader, whereas some might have not been identified and might have been easily overlooked or excluded in translation studies. But they had been proven to act actively and had a substantial influence on the production of monkey, such as these actors include the designer, the typographer, the engravers, artists, and publishers' counterparts. The third is that various non-human translation actors are identified. Non-human elements have been discussed in translation studies. For example, machine translation, translation software, or the most commonly the source and target texts, but they have always been presented as somewhat inert objects with little agency. This time, and in this research, non-human phenomena are studied as active agents in translation. Non-human agency is proved to be effective in translation, not just in the sense of a catalyst for change, but rather non-human actors directly function in providing or taking away other actors or resources, and in building and cutting connections in networks in the networking process of translation. The translation actors, human and non-human, actors differently to complete the translation project, and their roles and positions in the translation network changed dynamically as a result of their actions. In other words, translation action kept redefining translation actors, as well as their roles and positions in translation, which also suggests that the roles actors played were multiple, and their position in translation were by no means fixed. This study, moreover, finds that power relationships were common in translation projects, as actors always have to align or compete with others. For example, the publisher should be powerful enough to gather the necessary labor and resource to carry out the production of the translation, and actors such as the publisher, the translator, and the printers should be able to compete against other actors, non-human actors in this case, the wall and influenza, to prevent the project from being interrupted. And lastly, to summarize, ANT is applicable and meaningful both theoretically and methodologically to translation studies, and on condition that its theories and methods are fully studied and tailored to the translation case on the study. It can be quite revealing in reconstructing translation process in practical, social, and translational circumstances, because it not only encourages detailed descriptive accounts, but also provides analytical tools to cut through the surface of description. From an ANT perspective, I discover that actors' roles and positions involved throughout translation. This indicates that translation actors are much more dynamic, and they exist in many more types and forms as have been previously considered, and that translation is a much more complex network in terms of its configuration than has been previously perceived. And translation is also complex and uncertain in terms of its power dynamics, because when social and translational conditions change, which is quite common in real-time translation production, and some changes can be unexpected. In these circumstances, translation demands various and flexible working patterns. from a wide range of agents or actors. Okay, these are the references that I used for this talk. That's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wenyan. That was a really detailed presentation, and I really like how you first introduced the whole theory, made us more aware of the theory itself, and then how it was applied in translation studies, and then how your research contributes to further develop its application. And it was really nice to hear, in detail how that worked for you. And I hope our participants were also intrigued and have a lot of questions for you. Before we turn to the questions, I just wanted to thank you for your time and for presenting this book to us. It's always nice to hear from the author herself, not just read the book, but really hear how the book came about and what are the significant parts of the research for you in particular. I want to thank our one participant here on site. It's really great to have you. I really appreciate this change slowly happening from online to on-site and hybrid events, and then to thank all our participants in the online space on Zoom for joining us for this talk today. And then lastly, thank my colleague Queenie from the TIIS General Office for being always there for me and helping in organizing this event and making this event run as smooth as possible. We still have a few hiccups, as you could have noticed, but that's because we are shifting from one technology, one computer to another all the time. So these things still happen after 2 years of using Zoom and in talks and classrooms. Thank you for your patience. So the floor is now open for any discussion or questions that you might have for our guest speaker today. You can either unmute yourself and ask the question, or type the question in the chat and we can read the question. Any way that is best for you, really. So while our audience is maybe warming up and trying to decide what to ask, I will start with a question. So you mentioned that and one of the most difficult things, at least from what I hear and what I needed to decide when I was trying to apply the actor network theory, is to define the human and non-human actors and how the non-human actors influence the whole process. And you touched upon that. They're very often in translation studies looked at very static, but in your particular case, so in your particular case study, how exactly did the non-human actors influence the whole translation?
There are, if I remember right, because it's already 2 years ago when I was writing that book. I think if I remember right, there are altogether 3 or 4 groups of non-human actors identified in my book. And the first is the Second World War, and the second is the influenza, and the third is the network of texts. There are many texts involved in the translation production process. And to take the influenza and Second World War as an example, I think their agency as non-human actors in the production process of the translation is that they pose the trials to the production process. Yeah, I think this the trials. I think there are 4 trials that the war posed on the production process of translation. The trials appeared as restrictions, problems, or difficulties that the war caused by either, for example, introducing the wartime publishing regulations, and because paper was very a limited source and very precious source during the wartime, and so every time for the publisher to print or reprint the book, you need to get all the papers arranged, and also you can see from the paratext from the paratext of the translation that every edition of Monkey they produced during the war, they have that logo, the wartime publishing logo on that, and every batch, every version, I think the first 4 or 5 versions, they have only very limited number of printing because of the shortage of paper, and also besides the wartime publishing regulations, the war also taking away the necessary labor and resources in the production of the translation. For example, printing workers were enlisted to the army, and which caused the shortage of staff to the publishing company, and there were also, as I mentioned, paper shortages during the wartime, and these shortages of paper and staff actually interrupted the production of Monkey and making it making a delayed publication. And this is an example of war as a non-human actor. Has a very negative impact in that it played in delaying the production of the translation, and also in the outcome or the appearance of the translation also changed, because they have limited technology, limited paper to make the design in an economic way. They need to make the design in an economic way. So the design, the cover of the book also changed the form of the book. This is an example. Yeah.
That's really interesting, Wenyan, because you rarely hear how this events, social events, influence translation. So that's really interesting to hear how that played out in your research. Do we have any other questions here, or? Yep.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I am quite curious about the translators, because you said you have focused on like 5 different English translation versions of the book, right? And I'm curious how the translators' sinologist knowledge about the journey to the West has, have influenced their translation strategies.
I'm not, to be honest, I'm not quite familiar with how the other translators form their translation strategies, but I read in the preface of Monkey that Waley, before he decided to translate Monkey, he did a research on all the previous translations that exist, previous translations of 西游记, and he made a conclusion that those were all excerpt translations. So he, by saying that, I think he was going to, he was actually expressing that he's not satisfied with the too much editing or too much deletion of the that are made to the original. So I think that's why he aimed to present the original as fully or as completely as possible, although he only chose 30 chapters out of the 100, but the 30 chapters were translated almost or a full translation, I think, except the verses. And also he also thought that previous translations maybe they have different, the translators may have different purposes when they were translating. For example, Richard Timothy's A Pilgrim's Progress. What's the title of that? I think it's I think we can still find it here. A Mission to Heaven. I think David. I think that when Timothy Richard translated this, COG, I think he has a purpose to a religious purpose, I think. Yeah, and also David Waley, he has complete different purpose. That is to, I think, to entertain the readers, because I think that is partly connected with the war background during that time. And he also mentioned in his preface that the monkey was revolutionized, kind of, he has some revolutionary spirit, and that is what he thinks that readers may need at that period, at that war period. So I think these purposes may have affected the strategies that Waley employed in his translation. Yeah. Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the participants that are online? Or any suggestions or any comments? We have a bit more time, I think. So if you're not too tired, Wenyan, I just wanted to ask you one more thing before we close, and that's there's slight differences as I noticed in from your book and other applications. So most of the applications of the actor network theory in translation studies was done having in mind the ethnographic or following translation as it is happening. At least that's what Helen Buslin did at the very beginning. So my application of or an attempt to apply actor network was also on a translation that already happened. So if you compare the two approaches, was there anything that you would like to, any positive or negative aspects, or what might be the constraints, or what might be the benefits of doing this?
I would say that actually in my book, I actually did have a whole chapter that keeps the record of the ethnographic record of the translation production process. I think that's chapter 3, or the Monkey Project entitled. So and from chapter 4 and from chapter 4 on, I continues to generalize or to theorize what I have done based on the ethnographic records that are contained in chapter 3. I don't know if I think both are important approaches of study, because we need ethnographic study to know to study the practical translation actions and how translate, what are the translation actors involved and what are their actions in very real and practical circumstances. But I think based on this ethnographic study, I think it's no harm to go beyond that and to try to theorize what these ethnographic records, ethnographic study can help to theorize translation, to understand translation as a network. I think it can help to substantially enrich the meaning of translation. Translation can be seen as heterogeneous, as that contains human and non-human, and it can also, if we draw a network of all these actors and how and we can also see how a translation can be configured in that way. Yes.
Well, was it difficult though to get all the information? How difficult was it to find out what was actually happening during the process?
You mean to spot the information that I need from all these materials I collected? Yes, I think so. Yes, because there are so many materials that that's a large volume of materials. I think for me the procedure is because when we are doing ANT guided research, we do not need we should refrain ourselves from determining the actors from the very beginning, be agnostic. Yeah, so I think the best for me, I read all the letters that the publisher and the translator they exchanged. So by reading those letters, I identify more actors that are involved. Yeah, for example, the designer, as they mentioned. And then I go back and to look for more information about designer and then add him into this network. And so it's like a loop, I think. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Wenyan. Again, that was really interesting. You know, for me, I'm sure for all our participants, extremely interesting to hear this about this research. So one last call for any questions from the Zoom. If there's no questions, then I just want to remind everyone, you know, before we close, that this talk was part of a book talk series that HKBU Department of Translation, Interpreting and Intercultural Studies is organizing quarterly. So more or less every 3 months, we will have a new book presented, all in order to celebrate new research done by our translation studies colleagues, both here in Hong Kong, but also abroad, and discussing new translation studies research among us, and building a network and connections and collaborations in this way. So you can expect our next book talk to be happening in probably early February. I won't tell you the title of the book and the author now, but please follow our social media, our Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. We now have a new LinkedIn account as well. Also our website, and the information will be timely advertised there, so you can sign up for the next book talk. And lastly, I want to invite you, if you haven't done so already, to fill in the feedback questionnaire. The link is in the chat box. So if you check the chat box, you'll find the link to a Question Pro feedback form. I really appreciate if you can fill in the form. It's really short, only about 5 or 6 questions that you can answer by clicking most of the time, but it will really help us in improving this event in the future and make them more interesting and applicable to your needs. So again, thank you so much for your participation, and hope to see you again in February. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all for participating in this talk. Bye.